All right, hello once again. Disability Law Show. John Scholes here along with Sivan Tumarkin. Reaching out anytime. We'll put it up on the screen during the entire 30 minutes, but just so you have it right away, 1-855-821-5900, help@disabilityrights.ca, and you can also go to the website mydisabilityquestions.com, which we will refer to several times during the show today. So coming up on the show in just a bit, five common questions about long-term disability and CPP disability as well. If you've wondered about either of those, we will try to answer those questions by the five in just a bit. But Sivan, welcome. Good to have you along, pal. What do you got for the week that was, a situation that's been going on with you recently? How are you?
I'm good, John. Absolutely. Let's just jump right into it. There's actually a topic that's quite interesting for me, and unfortunately it has to do with COVID, obviously, like everything else nowadays. I was approached by a few individuals who told me that they suffer from a new illness, let's say. It's not a new illness, it's anxiety, high levels of anxiety, but the term for it is coronaphobia. And, you know, people are obviously aware of what a phobia is, agoraphobia, arachnophobia. You know, it's when you have this fear, this intense fear of something, and it, in some instances, paralyzes you from being able to do things, from going outside of the house, working, etc. And coronaphobia is essentially that high level of anxiety that psychologists have now been terming this fear that people have of the coronavirus, of COVID, and that's affecting everything that they do at home, at work, etc. Here's the issue, though, John. Some of these individuals who are suffering from coronaphobia and other types of anxiety, depression, and other kinds of mental illnesses and conditions, they apply for long-term disability and they get denied. And some of these individuals that have reached out to me from across the country, not just from Ontario, but from BC, Alberta, where we have offices, where we help people with their long-term disability claims, they've reached out to me because they've been denied their long-term disability claims as a result of the insurance company saying we don't recognize coronaphobia and there is insufficient medical documentation and this is a new condition, etc. Well, let me just go back to basics here. And again, this is for viewers who have been watching the show, John, for a while, but also for new viewers. If you are disabled from doing your job, from performing the essential tasks of your own occupation for the first 2 years of disability, or beyond that 2-year period, if you are disabled from performing the essential tasks of any occupation for which you're suited for by training, education, or experience, whether it's for psychological reasons or physical reasons or a mixture of the two, you should qualify for long-term disability, assuming you have that kind of coverage, either through work, through your health benefits plan, or if you've purchased that coverage privately. It doesn't matter if it's called coronaphobia or if your psychotherapist or psychologist or psychiatrist has diagnosed you with depression or other types of anxiety. At the end of the day, if you are disabled from working, you should qualify for LTD if you have that coverage. And if you've been denied on the basis of the insurance company saying, we don't cover that, it's a new condition, there's not enough information, you need to give us a call immediately because we can tell you what your options are. And the option is not to re-ask the insurance company to cover you, to appeal that decision. The option is to start that legal claim against the insurance company to force them to pay you what you are owed. So, John, I suspect we're going to see a lot more, you know, as again, COVID stays with us for the foreseeable future, people who are being denied their LTD claims when they have legitimate claims, when they cannot work and their doctors are saying that they're disabled from working. This idea of coronaphobia, anxiety, depression, we are seeing it more and more. And unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more insurance companies deny these claims. You can do something about it. That's the point. We help people each and every day at each one of our offices in Ontario, in Alberta, in BC. We help people get the money they are owed from their insurance companies.
You know, it seems too when they say, you know, this is a new diagnosis, it's too young, we don't cover that. Is your insurance not triggered by the symptom rather than the diagnosis?
100%. And you know, that leads to another point, which you're alluding to, which is, do you need to have a diagnosis in order to qualify for LTD? No, you don't. Absolutely not. In fact, I've yet to see an LTD policy, the actual contract between you and the insurance company, that stipulates that there has to be a label on your condition. Absolutely not. I've helped many individuals where the doctors just don't know what is ailing the person. Usually that has to do with cognitive type of impairments, issues with memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, focus, concentration. And the insurance company is simply denying the claim on the basis that there's no diagnosis, there's no label. That is incorrect. The insurance company cannot deny you on that basis. If your doctors confirm that you have symptoms that functionally disable you from working, then you should qualify for LTD and you should be getting payments.
There is a website we use as well on our sister show, Employment Law Show, Sivan, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Now, by the name, obviously it has a lot to do with employment law, but there is a very robust, cool section there on disability law as well. Tell me about it.
Absolutely. And John, people who have watched the show and watched the Employment Law Show, they know that our law firm focuses on two areas of law, and two areas only: employment law and long-term disability law. And those two areas of law intersect. And as you can imagine, people who have issues with their insurance companies oftentimes also have some issues and questions with respect to their employment, or they're let go from their employment because they can't do their job. And vice versa, people who are having issues with their employment, oftentimes it's because they are suffering from some kind of a disability. And so the Pocket Employment Lawyer is a free online tool that you can go to understand what your rights are as an employee, but also if you're also experiencing issues with your insurance company, your LTD insurer, your long-term disability insurer, you can go there. And you're not contacting us, you're simply going on there to get answers to your questions, to the most common questions. And it literally takes a few seconds. You will get accurate answers. That's why it's called a Pocket Employment Lawyer. And we've done that for free, and we've made sure to make it as robust as possible to give you the answers you need. And if at that point, after you get those answers, you want to reach out to us, there is a little button there, allows you to contact us, but you don't have to. The point is that if you are suffering from long-term disability and you have issues with your insurance company, or if you're an employee and you're having issues with your employer, you can go to the Pocket Employment Lawyer and you will get answers almost instantaneously to your questions.
You can go anytime as well to disabilityrights.ca. That's the website for the firm, and there you will find links to our long-running radio show as well. Sivan, you're all over radio and TV. You and James and Tamar as well. They all host these shows interchangeably. But while we're there and on the radio for an hour version of this show, basically, a ton of phone calls come in. We answer those phone calls, and we talk about them here on the TV show. So we'll get to the first one for today right now.
About 5 weeks ago, I had all the symptoms of COVID-19. Now I got a little bit of memory loss. I was taking 10 pills a day. I was in the hospital. I'm just on short-term disability, but I don't think I can go back to work because I have a hard time breathing now. I'm just wondering if I would have a case if you think. I even went for the breathing test.
Yeah, John, this is something that, again, we're seeing more and more. People who are on short-term disability and they want to understand, will I qualify for long-term disability? Look, the question is really quite simple. Are you disabled from working? Are you disabled from performing the essential tasks of your own occupation when your short-term disability comes to an end? And the answer to that may be yes, maybe no, but we need to know what your doctors are saying. If you have a family doctor, if you have a psychologist, if you have a surgeon, whatever the issue is you're dealing with, if your doctors are saying that you cannot perform the essential tasks of your own occupation, then yes, absolutely, you should qualify for long-term disability. And if you're not, if for whatever reason you get denied, any reason, that's when you should reach out to us, because we deal with these kinds of denials. And John, I keep telling people, it's not actually a difficult process for the most part for us to deal with the insurance company. If you're doing this on your own without expertise, well, that's going to be a problem because you're up against professionals, right? Insurance companies, as we know, are in the business of not paying claims. They're in the business of making money. And that's really, the idea behind the insurance industry is to collect as much premiums as possible and then not pay when they need to or pay very little. And so that's why when people come to us and we assess their claims, it takes us only a few minutes to figure out if in fact you have a case or not. And if you do have a case, we'll tell you that. We'll tell you what your options are, and then you can make a decision. You and your family, not us. You can make a decision on how you want to proceed, but at least you'll be armed with this information. So this gentleman here, to me, John, it sounds like he's pretty disabled. Taking all these pills, having issues with memory, all these kinds of things. Again, at the beginning of the show, we talked about Coronaphobia. There's going to be a lot more of these kinds of cases that are going to come through the door, unfortunately, with people suffering not only from these kinds of phobias, but also from the long-term effects of the coronavirus and other kinds of viruses and disabilities. So if you're in that situation, you're on short-term disability, you want to know, will I qualify for long-term disability? Well, guess what? If you cannot work and your doctors confirm that you cannot work, you should be eligible for LTD. And if you get denied, we are your first phone call.
All right, coming up here, 5 common questions about LTD and CPP disability as well. If you're unfamiliar with both of those, to some degree, we'll try to answer some of those questions after a break. Number 1-855-821-5900, help@disabilityrights.ca to reach out through email as well. We'll continue after a short one, Disability Law Show.
People think you have to sign back a severance offer by a deadline. EmploymentLawyer.ca says that is a myth. Deadlines are used as a pressure tactic. Make sure the offer is fair before you sign. Always check with the employment lawyer first at EmploymentLawyer.ca. If your long-term disability claim is denied, should you appeal?
Appeals often fail because insurance companies control the process. So long as you appeal, you're playing by their rules.
You should never appeal the denial of your disability benefits. Appeals are just a mirage of false hope.
Don't. That's their process. Take it out of their hands and fight for your rights with our help.
Go to disabilityrights.ca. Discover your rights, fight back, and get what you're owed. People think contractors aren't owed severance. EmploymentLawyer.ca says that is a myth. Many contractors are actually employees and are entitled to full severance pay. Always check with the employment lawyer first at EmploymentLawyer.ca.
And welcome back. Disability Law Show. John Scholes, Sivan Tumarkin, reaching out anytime during the show or otherwise. The phone number is 1-855-821-5900, help@disabilityrights.ca as well. And the website, which we already talked about, you can use anytime, mydisabilityquestions.com. That has a searchable database as well. You can ask your questions before you click the send button. You can look to see if a question similar to yours has been asked and answered in full. If not, leave it there and a member of the team will get to it. Okay, Sivan, let's get to this. 5 common questions about LTD and CPPD as well. The first common question, are they the same thing?
No, they're not. And that often confuses people, John. CPP disability is really a subsection of CPP, the Canadian Pension Plan. That's run through the federal government. So when you apply for CPP disability, through that plan, you are applying essentially to the government to recognize that you are disabled from working and then pay you that pension under CPP disability. LTD is different. LTD is through private insurance. And when I say private insurance, I mean one of two things. Either insurance through work. Most people, John, when they work, and it can be a big company, a small company, doesn't matter, as part of your health plan, you have dental, you have coverage for physio, massage. Many people have coverage for short-term disability and or long-term disability. So that's the kind of coverage. That's with an insurance company. You can also buy private coverage. Let's say you don't have that through work. Well, guess what? You can call up a broker, an insurance broker, and get that kind of coverage. So LTD is through an insurance company, either through work benefits or privately you purchased. CPP disability is disability pension through the government. They intersect. It's important to understand how they work together, but they are separate. Okay, the test to get them is separate as well. And oftentimes we tell people that if you've been accepted to CPP disability, well, then the insurance company should be paying you as well. Not always. It doesn't always happen. And frankly, you could be eligible for LTD, and CPP disability may turn you down. Again, they're not the same thing. And I tell John, I tell people, if you have any questions, just ring me up and I'll explain this in more detail. But what you need to know is that these are 2 separate programs. One is private insurance, the other one is government.
Okay, quite often when someone, a claimant is on their LTD, that LTD provider will say, hey, do us a favor, you want to apply for CPP disability as well? Why do they do that?
Well, they do that because if you get accepted for CPP disability, I generally give an example here. I say, let's say you're getting $2,000 a month from your LTD insurance company, and you got accepted for CPP disability as well, and now the government is kicking to you also, let's say, an additional $1,000. Well, you're not getting $3,000 in total per month. You're not getting $2,000 from your insurer, and 1,000 from CPP Disability. You're still getting 2,000, except that now your insurance company gets a credit for the money that CPP Disability is giving you. So instead of having to pay you $2,000 a month, they now have to pay you only $1,000 because you're already getting $1,000 from CPP Disability. That said, there are advantages that we're going to talk about in terms of getting CPP Disability above and beyond just making sure that you're getting the full amount that you're owed.
Yeah, that's kind of the next question. So someone hears that saying, okay, well, it's a zero-sum game. If I get one or two, I'm still getting the same amount. Why do I want to apply for? What's the advantage of me applying for CPP?
You know what, John? There are multiple advantages, and I get these kinds of questions each and every week, and I answer them the exact same way, which is, if you get approved, and I mentioned this before, for CPP Disability, arguably it's more difficult to get CPP Disability than it is to get LTD, just in terms of the test that you need to qualify and be eligible for those benefits. Again, that's my opinion. Some people will disagree, but generally I think it's more difficult to get CPP Disability. So if you got approved for it, it's going to make it that much harder for your insurance company down the road to say, well, we don't think you're disabled, because the government has deemed you disabled. That's one benefit. Another benefit is that if you get approved for CPP Disability, and then for whatever reason you get denied or cut off LTD from your insurance company, while we fight the insurance company for you, guess what? You're still getting money coming in from your CPP Disability. So it's not as though your financial lifeline has been cut altogether. You're still getting some money in. So that's another benefit. So you have all these kinds of benefits. There's really very little downside, if any. But I understand, John, how some people say, well, I paid for my LTD, or my employer paid for my LTD. Why should I be applying for CPP Disability? There are reasons for it. The other thing to consider is that if you don't apply for CPP Disability, you may have a problem with your LTD insurer. Because under your policy of insurance with your LTD provider, you may in fact be obligated to apply for CPP Disability. And if you don't apply, your insurance company may very well estimate or guesstimate how much they think you should be getting from CPP Disability, and then reduce your monthly amounts from LTD accordingly. So you see, John, it makes sense to simply apply for CPP Disability if in fact your disability is severe and prolonged, because there is that interplay between that and your LTD.
Applying is one thing, getting CPP is one thing as well. What if you're rejected when you apply for that CPP disability?
Well, I keep, pounding on the table and saying that if you're rejected from LTD, if your LTD insurer denies your claim, you should not appeal that decision. You should be calling us and let us help you through a legal route, which is a lot more powerful than an appeal that has no teeth. CPP Disability is different. Because it's through the government, I tell people that if you're denied CPP Disability, you should appeal that decision. You don't have to, I can tell you that right now, unless your policy of insurance with your LTD provider requires you to exhaust all levels of appeal with CPP Disability. You don't have an obligation. As soon as you apply for CPP Disability and you get rejected, you've done your part in terms of what the insurance company requires you to do, and they cannot reduce your LTD amount because you haven't appealed. So, again, if you are rejected by CPP Disability, your option is to appeal. You're not going to sue the government. But if you are rejected or denied or cut off LTD, do not appeal those ones. Do not deal with the appeal process with your insurance company. It usually leads nowhere, and it just takes you around in circles. Eventually, you'll end up calling us anyways. But by that point, you would have wasted a year or two trying to fight with the insurance company, trying to appeal those denials. Don't do that.
Okay, don't appeal. We know that. You say it all the time. James says it when he's on the show as well. So what should they do once they've been either cut off or denied their LTD?
So I want to make this clear. When you are cut off or denied long-term disability, your options are to do nothing, which is a really bad option if you still can't work. So I don't recommend that. Another option is to appeal those denials or cutoffs, which again I think is a big mistake. James and I are on the same page. In fact, most lawyers that do what I do will tell you that it usually leads nowhere. The third option is the legal route, is starting a legal claim against the insurance company. And there's a good reason why that is so effective. Because once we start the legal process against the insurance company, we are taking the power away from the hands of the insurance company and putting them now in the hands of a third party, which is this legal process. In other words, the insurance company understands that they're not going to be able to stonewall you. They're not going to be able to simply not pay you if you are owed that money, because eventually, if they don't come to the table to negotiate in good faith, they'll end up before a judge. And if you are disabled and your doctors say you are disabled, they're going to have to pay a lot of money down the road, not only to you, right, because they owe you that under the policy, but also to their lawyers to defend that claim. Now, John, I want to make clear here, I used to work for insurance companies, so I have that kind of a viewpoint, right? I used to defend them, and I used to speak with adjusters all the time, and I can tell you that insurance companies are not in the business of defending these kinds of legal claims. They hate them. They hate them because when they have to pay their defense lawyers to fight legitimate claims, they are bleeding money, and they hate doing that, which is why when we start a legal claim against the insurance company, after they've incorrectly denied or cut off somebody's LTD payments, we get results. And those results, we get them fairly quickly. It's not a difficult process. We take care of everything, and the reality is if we tell you have a case, we tell you that the insurance company owes you money, trust me, they owe you money.
Take a short break, pal. Coming up here, can you get your LTD benefits without a diagnosis? We'll tackle that after a break. The number in the meantime, 1-855-821-5900. DisabilityRights.ca, the website to catch our long-running radio show as well, and so much more information on there. And stick around, we're coming right back. More disability law shows on the way.
People think you aren't owed severance pay if you are fired for a reason. EmploymentLawyer.ca says that is a myth. Most for-cause terminations are false, and you are still owed full severance. Always check with the employment lawyer first at EmploymentLawyer.ca. How do you force insurance companies to pay long-term disability claims?
Insurance companies deny legitimate claims all the time. They're playing the odds. They know that most people are just going to walk away.
Your insurer may ignore you, they may even ignore your doctors, but they can't ignore us.
We know how insurance companies work. We know their weaknesses. We know how to use the legal process to force them to pay you what you're owed.
Go to DisabilityRights.ca. Discover your rights, fight back, and get what you're owed. People think you are only owed 2 weeks' pay when you lose your job. EmploymentLawyer.ca says that is a myth. You may be owed much more than 2 weeks per year. Don't settle for less. Always check with the employment lawyer first at EmploymentLawyer.ca.
Alrighty, thanks for hanging around. We got more to go here. Disability Law Show reaching out. I'll give you yet another way, and we talked about it already and referred to it, mydisabilityquestions.com. Great website, free and anonymous. You can ask your questions there. There's also a searchable database of questions that were asked in the past. But we'll get to one from there, Sivan. Read it out to you. This one from Simon. Simon says, I have constant stomach pain, making it difficult to concentrate. My family doctor sent me to see a gastroenterologist, a neurologist, and cardiologist. I've had dozens of tests and procedures. None of them have led to a diagnosis. I sell cars for a living, and my doctor agrees that there's no way I could do that with my symptoms. My LTD was cut off after more test results came back negative. Is there anything I can do without a diagnosis?
100%. 100%. As long as your doctors, Simon, have confirmed that you are suffering from these symptoms that are disabling you, that functionally impair you from doing your job, selling cars, your LTD insurer should not have cut off your benefits. And this is what I want to get across, John, that people don't understand. And insurance companies, I think many adjusters, for whatever reason, don't get this. They are bound by the provisions of the LTD policy. They can't make up rules as they go. And I see them doing this all the time. I have yet to see a policy, an insurance policy, that states that you need to have a diagnosis or a label for your condition. Look, everybody agrees that medicine is not perfect. Okay? It's an evolving science. What we know today is not what we know a year from now and a year after that, etc. I mean, look at COVID, for example, right? I mean, we learn these things. And so oftentimes doctors, they may argue, they may have different opinions as to, what is disabling you and what is the reason for that. And maybe it's something completely new. No one knows. But as long as we know that you are in fact experiencing certain symptoms that are disabling you, there may not be any objective evidence. We may not see it on an X-ray. I mean, John, if you have a headache, do you think you're going to see that on an X-ray necessarily? Right? You have back pain, does that mean that it's going to show up in an MRI? Not always, not necessarily. What about psychological issues? you're not going to necessarily see psychological issues, depression, anxiety on imaging, right? So at the end of the day, this is why we rely on whatever the doctors are saying. And in this gentleman's case here, clearly he's disabled. He's going to see all these specialists. No one is saying that he's malingering. No one is saying that he's lying. If his doctors confirm that he's in fact disabled as a result of those symptoms, he cannot do the essential tasks of his own employment, well, guess what? His insurance company is obligated to pay him LTD. And when they cut him off, that gives rise to his legal rights. That triggers his ability to then go after them. And I'm not saying he does that by himself. I'm saying that this is what we do. This is what we focus on. This is what our lawyers, our team does each and every day across Ontario, across BC, and across Alberta. We deal with these insurance companies, which are, national, if not international entities. They know us, they know our reputation, and they know that if they deny the claim, like Simon's here, on the basis that there's no label or no diagnosis, they're going to have to pay. It's just a matter of how much and when.
Let's get to a quick email here, Sivan. Again, it is help@disabilityrights.ca. Shailene Wright says, my son suffers from depression and went through a divorce last year. As a result, he often turns to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. He did apply for LTD a few months ago, but was denied. He's currently taking time off work. Once he burns through his vacation days, his boss said he must come back to work or he'll be fired, even though his psychiatrist says there's no way he can. What can he do?
Well, this is interesting because this person, John, has two types of issues here, obviously. In addition to the actual psychological issues he's dealing with, he has the LTD issue because he was denied. Yep. And I can tell you right now, we can definitely force the insurance company to pay him, because as long as a psychiatrist confirms in writing that he's suffering from whatever the illness is, whatever the condition is, well, guess what? The insurance company must pay because he cannot work, and the psychiatrist confirms it. But there's also the issue with the employer, right? The employer is saying, you don't come back, we're going to fire you. No, not so fast. And you and Lior, of course, my partner, you deal with this kind of stuff on the employment law show, right? Employers have to be very careful when they're dealing with a disabled individual. And we deal with situations, John, quite often when a person is rejected by their LTD insurer, or they're having issues with their LTD insurer. And at the same time, the employer is taking these extreme positions and sometimes firing individuals, saying, for whatever reason, we don't want you back. Well, guess what? When the employer does that, the employer has to pay severance and potentially has exposed themselves, the employer, to human rights damages, because it's against the human rights code in virtually every jurisdiction in this country to fire a disabled employee. And this is important because if you are on LTD, or if you're entitled to LTD, and your employer fires you or make it impossible for you to come back, so as to give rise to a constructive dismissal, let's say, if you're owed severance, in many instances, the insurance company is entitled to a credit for that severance under the policy of insurance, which is why the human rights element here is very important, because if your employer owes you human rights damages because they fired you because you're disabled, well, guess what? The insurance company can't touch that. And so, again, there is this overlap between employment law and disability law, and this is, again, something that we're attuned to because our firm specifically deals with employment law and disability law, and those two areas intersect quite often.
Yeah, it comes up quite often, in fact, more often than people would think. They at least have to accommodate someone going back to work after disability. Again, you guys can get involved on either side with that one as well, right?
Yeah, you have to accommodate, absolutely. I mean, not a day, forget about a week, not a day goes by, John, when I don't get some questions from disabled individuals about their workplace rights. And of course, I then refer them to some of my colleagues in my firm who deal with employment law, and vice versa. The employment lawyers who have clients that are having issues with their employment, with their employers, and at the same time, they don't know how to navigate the disability route, right? Dealing with short-term disability or long-term disability, again, because there's that overlap. And this is what we deal with here. And, the most common thing that happens that I see in this context is when the individual is fired from their job and at the same time they're cut off LTD. Yeah. And we can protect them on both ends, on the employment and the disability fronts.
All right, done for another week. Nicely done, sir. 1-855-821-5900 is the number. Disabilityrights.ca is that website to catch links to our radio show. And email is help@disabilityrights.ca as well. We'll catch you next time on the Disability Law Show.